Last time on Dawn of the Zeds, the zombie advance began on the forest track to the northwest of the town. Sheriff Hunt was dispatched to St. Thomas, and with some very accurate long-range and short-range gunfire, he was able to dispatch the horde before it posed a serious threat to St. Thomas. Then in the mountains to the northeast of town, the zombie horde began moving towards Lefty's Pass. Mr. Johnson was dispatched to the location, and by use of his heavy weapons and a little street fighting, he was able to remove the threat, at least for the time being. However, the citizens of Ingeborg to the southeast of town were not as lucky. Zombie horde began moving up the interstate, and the civilian defenses were routed. Hello everyone, and welcome back to the Solo Gamers Club. Thanks for joining me for our second video in our playthrough of Dawn of the Zeds, 3rd edition. In our previous video, we've begun Act 2. The zombies are becoming more and more aggressive. We'll begin our next round with a drawn event card, and the card is revealed to be Highway Night Assault. We have 1 point available to us on the 4R track, and we're going to use that to move our refugees from the suburbs track, and they're going to enter the town center. Their arrival is going to raise the infection rate, so we're going to raise that from its current position at 2 to 3. Those refugees are going to be directed to the refugee camp in the northeast corner of town. And with those refugees come some rumors. So we're going to draw a fate card and find out the location of the rumor token. That card is Adrenaline Supply Discovered, and we can hold that card for later. Play during the action phase for +2 event actions. That's good. But we're going to place a rumor token on the suburbs track with the strongest Zed or Zed mob, and that's going to be on 5th Street in the village of East Irick. And when a heroic civilian or special civilians unit occupies the space with the rumor, we can spend an action to reveal the rumor, or reveal the rumor at the beginning of the next action phase for free. Now it's our infection phase. We have an infection level of 3. We'll have to roll 2d6. The roll is a 4, so we have no outbreak occurring during this turn. And unfortunately, in the eat phase, we have to consume 1 supply, and that's going to move our supplies from 1 down to 0. And we'll most definitely need to be doing some foraging during the turn. And now it's the Zeds phase, and there's going to be 2 activations on the highway track. Card also says at the beginning of this phase, increase infection per Zeds unit on the highway track, and then place a new Zeds unit on the highway track's start space. Defending units receive no terrain shifts during this phase. The highway track currently has 1 Zeds unit in Ingeborg, so that is going to raise our infection level by 1. And a new 5-point Zed is placed on the starting point of the highway track. Highway track is going to activate twice. Zombies in Ingeborg will move to Highway Interstate 4. And a 10 strength zombie mob is going to move to Interstate 6. Highway track will activate once again, and the damaged 6 strength Zed in Interstate 4 is going to move into the nuclear plant. This assault will overpower any type of defenses at the nuclear plant. So the 6-strength zombies will be attacking a 3-strength civilians unit. This attack will be resolved on the Zeds ×2 column. Roll is an 8, and the Zeds are going to take 1 hit, but the civilians will take 2 hits and will have to retreat. What remains of the armed civilians retreat to Interstate 2, but the zombie horde, now damaged, enters the nuclear plant, and the refugees are devoured, and chaos ensues at the nuclear plant. Now it's our action phase, and we have 1 action available to us. We're in desperate need of supplies, so we're going to have to ask Mr. Johnson to use his scavenger ability at Lefty's Pass and hopefully find us some supplies. His scavenger ability will allow him to roll 2 dice when conducting the forage action. His roll is a 3 and a 5, and the 5 is going to give Mr. Johnson 1 supply. We'll mark it accordingly. It raises our supplies to 1. As the refugees have been devoured, it's going to raise the infection level by 2. Now climbs to a moderately high level of 6. Seeing the increased activity on the highway track, Colonel Kingman is going to spring into action, and he's going to move to Interstate 1 and attempt to set up a defense. Desperate times call for desperate measures. We're going to use our adrenaline supply discovered. That's going to give us 2 event actions that we can use in this turn. With that, we're going to activate the Farmingdale Furies, and they're going to move from the town center and join Colonel Kingman in Interstate 1. With our final activation of the turn, we're going to activate Bouncing Betty. She's in Beauville right now, and she's going to move to East Irick and attempt to clean up the village and investigate the rumor that is there. Bouncing Betty is going to go on a rampage. She's going to attack those Zeds using the human ×3 count. Her roll is a 7, and she is going to annihilate the remaining Zeds in East Irick. Betty won't have time to investigate the rumor at this point. She is going to start restoring order in East Irick. Chaos is removed from East Irick, and the infection level will drop from 6 to 5. We'll perform our housekeeping and move on to a new round. We'll begin the next round by drawing an event card, and that's revealed to be Utter Chaos. Begin with our 4R phase. We have 1 point of activation there, but we have no raiders, rangers, refugees, or rescuers on the board at present. We'll move on to our infection phase. Our infection level is at 5, and we're going to roll 2 dice. Roll is a 6, so we'll have no outbreak at this time. Next up is our eat phase, and we're going to have to consume 1 point of supplies, bringing us back down to 0 again. Now it's the Zeds phase, and they're going to be activating on the forest track, the suburbs track, and the mountain track. The event text reads, each named space that becomes Zeds controlled this turn receives 2 chaos markers instead of 1. You can remove only 1 per turn as usual during the housekeeping phase. We'll begin with the forest track. Forest track is currently empty of Zeds, but a new 6-point Zed is spotted at the start space. Next is the suburbs track, and thanks to Bouncing Betty, It's clear of zombie activity for the moment. But a low-strength 4-point Z unit appears on the horizon in the start of the suburbs track. And the mountain track activates with a very strong 7-point toxic Z moving into Trail 6 and quickly approaching Lefty's Pass. It's currently defended by Mr. Johnson and some defiant civilians. We'll move on to our activation phase, and we're granted 3 activation points for the turn. We'll set our activation level to 3, and as our supplies are desperately low, we'll begin with a forage action, and we're going to utilize Mr. Johnson, our scavenger. We'll reduce our action level to 2. And Mr. Johnson is going to forage in Lefty's Pass. His scavenger ability will allow him to roll 2 dice. He rolls a 4 and a 2, and that's going to allow him to find 1 supply, and we'll mark it accordingly. As we begin our action phase, Bouncing Betty begins to investigate the rumors in East Irick. And she uncovers Dr. Martus's journal. Dr. Martus's journal will allow us to spend an action to remove any Super Zeds unit in play and return it to the Super Zeds Cup. Also, we can select any one research card that was set aside during setup and place it on top of the research discard pile. This does not count as a successful research. You can still make a research die roll, but you do receive the card's benefit. That's great. As those toxic Zeds approach Lefty's Pass, we're going to activate Mr. Johnson, and he's going to use his heavy weapons ability to make a gunfire attack. His heavy weapons ability will allow him to roll on the 5-level gunfire attack column. It's going to move our actions down to 1 and our ammo to 3. Mr. Johnson lays down some accurate gunfire. He rolls a 9, and that's going to inflict 3 hits on the toxic Zeds. And that's going to reduce them from a combat level of 7 down to a 5. Seeing his success, Mr. Johnson is going to activate again, spending 1 action and 1 ammo, and he's going to use his heavy weapons once again and target the toxic Zeds in Trail 6. His roll is a 6, and that's going to do 2 points of damage to the toxic Zeds. They're 1 hit away from being eliminated. And if Mr. Johnson didn't have enough to do defending Lefty's Pass, he's pressed into service with the player action token, and he's going to do some foraging. He rolls a 1 and a 5, and that's going to entitle him to 1 supply. We'll move our supplies up to 2. Great job on this turn, Mr. Johnson. We'll move on to our housekeeping phase, where we're going to reset our tokens, and we'll get ready for our next round. And our next event is Something Wicked This Way Comes. Our 4-hour phase is 0, so we'll have no activity there. And we're going to have to make an infection roll. Our infection level is at 5. We'll make the roll. Roll is an 8, so we have no outbreak at this time. Move on to our eat phase, and that is a die roll. Well, we have no one at the Farmingdale General Hospital, but we do have 1 refugee in the refugee camp. So we're going to have to roll a die. The roll is a 6, so we won't need to consume any supplies at this time. Now it's the Zeds phase, and all the Zeds, all tracks are going to activate. We're going to need to roll a d6 for each of the catacomb spaces, and depending upon the result, new Zeds may appear. We'll make a roll for each of the catacombs. Roll is a 2 for the first catacomb and a 5 for the second. Result of 2 means a new Zed will appear, and a mid-strength 6-point Zed appears in the first catacomb. Now all of the Zeds are going to activate. We'll start with the forest track, where a 6-point strength Zed is going to move into Route 6. In the suburbs track, we have a 4-point strength Zeds unit moving into 6th Street. Now on the tunnel track, we have a 6-point Zed in the catacombs. We're going to make a die roll to determine what happens to it in those catacombs. Roll is a 1. It's going to move normally, and it will enter Dr. Matusa's office, and with it, chaos will ensue. The 5-point strength Zed unit in the chromotechnics lab will move to Red Lab 6. On the highway track, a damaged 3-point Zed at the nuclear plant will attack the civilians unit on Interstate 2. But Colonel Kingman is nearby. He's going to employ his defensive perimeter ability in an effort to stop them from advancing on the hapless civilians. Colonel Kingman rolls a 3, and his efforts fail. The zombie horde will attack the civilians on the interstate. They will attack with Zed's advantage. Roll is an 8. 2 hits are inflicted on each group, and that's going to decimate the civilians. But the civilians manage to inflict 2 hits on the Zeds in the process. We'll make a saving throw for the civilians. Sadly, the roll is a 2. The civilians are sent to the cemetery. The 10-point strength zombie mob in Interstate 6 advances to Indeberg. Now in the mountains, a 5-point strength toxic Zed unit in Trail 6 advances on the defenses of Lefty's Pass. Once again, Mr. Johnson steps to the front to handle the defense. Mr. Johnson uses his traps ability to see if he can halt the zombies' efforts at Lefty's Pass. His roll is a 5, and Mr. Johnson's efforts at setting the traps are successful. The toxic Zed unit is destroyed in the process. Subsequent to that, Mr. Johnson withdrew to the Lucky Strike mine, and the local civilians lose their defiant ability. It'll complete the Zeds phase, and we'll move on to our action phase with 3 actions. We'll set our actions marker to 3. We'll begin by expending an action and having Mr. Johnson forage at the Lucky Strike mine using his scavenger ability. His roll is a 4 and a 5, and that will entitle him to 1 ammo. That'll move our ammo up from 2 to 3. Security forces in the tunnel track are going to move into action to respond to the zombie activity in and around the catacombs. We'll spend 1 action and activate the 4-point strength security unit at the town center and activate him for movement. He has 3 movement points. He's going to move from the town center basement to the catacombs and Red Labs 3. And from the catacombs, he hopes to put a stop to the zombie advance through the tunnels. At St. Thomas, we'll spend 1 action and activate Sheriff Hunt. He's going to spend 1 ammunition and attempt a long-range attack on the 6th strength Zed in Route 6. Rolls an 8, and using column 4 for the gunfire attack, will inflict 2 hits on the zombies in Route 6. Sheriff Hunt is going to use his leadership ability token, and he's going to have the civilians in St. Thomas forage. Rolls a 2, and they're unsuccessful in their efforts. As a free action, we're going to use our Equip Refugees token, and we're going to militarize refugees at the camp. That's a free action, and we're going to replace those fleeing refugees with a civilians unit and place it in town center. And finally, we're going to use our player action at the Lucky Strike mine, where Mr. Johnson, with his scavenger ability, will attempt to find some ammunition. Sadly, the roll is a 1 and a 3, and Mr. Johnson fails in his attempt. And that will bring our actions phase to a close. We undertake our housekeeping phase, where our tokens are replenished and we're ready for a new turn. And our next event is You Gotta Be Kidding. We'll begin with our 4R phase. We have 2 actions in that, but unfortunately we have no units that we can move on the board, as we have no raiders, rangers, refugees, or rescuers. We move on to the infection phase, and we're not required to roll for that this turn, which is great. We'll move on to the eat phase, and we need to roll a d6. But there are no members in the refugee camp or at the hospital, so we're not required to do that. Now it's the Zeds phase, and all tracks are going to activate. The event says at the beginning of this phase, place a new Zeds unit on the start space of every track. Apply the stacking limit if necessary. And then we're going to remove all hit markers from Zed units. All right. We'll begin with the forest track, and we're going to be placing a new Zed there. And a 5 strength Zed appears at the starting space. The 6 strength Zed in Route 6 is now healed. On the suburbs track, we're going to place a new Zeds unit on the starting space. And that's also revealed to be a 5 strength Zed. And at the tunnel track, at the starting space, a 5-point strength Zed is revealed. Moving on to the highway track, a lowly 2-point Zed appears at the starting space. In Interstate 2, a 3 strength point Zed is healed. And finally on the mountain track, a 6 strength point Zed appears. Now all the tracks are going to activate. We'll begin with the forest track, where the zombies will advance from Route 6 into Route 5, with the 5 strength point Zed following close behind, moving into Route 6. On the suburbs track, we have a 4-point strength Zed on 6th Street. It moves into East Irick, and that's defended by Bouncing Betty, where hand-to-hand combat will ensue. Rolls a 10, and Bouncing Betty is going to use her Ruthless ability, allowing her to roll on the Human ×3 track. And it's going to inflict a total of 4 hits on the zombies. And that's going to send them into full retreat. Great job, Betty. 5 strength point Zed from the starting space will move into 6th Street, creating a 7-point Zed's mob. The attack in East Irick will raise the infection rate by 1. Now at the tunnel track, we have a 6 strength point Zed from Red Labs 4, and it will advance on the catacombs. The 4 strength point security unit defends. It's going to be Zed's advantage. Roll is a 6, and the Zeds will take 1 hit, but the defenders will take 3 hits. And that'll force the security units to retreat to the security guard post at Red Labs 2. The attack at the catacombs will raise the infection level from 6 to 7. The other Zeds units will move closer towards town center, with a 5 strength point Zed entering the catacombs at Red Labs 5 and a 5 strength Zeds entering the Chromotechnics lab. A 3 strength point Zeds unit in Interstate 2 is going to attempt to attack the Farmingdale Furies and Colonel Kingman at Interstate 1. Colonel Kingman is going to employ his defensive perimeter ability. His roll is a 2, and unfortunately his defensive perimeter does not hold. The Farmingdale Furies step into action, and they're going to have human times 2 will be the column that we'll be using for the resolution. The roll is an 11, and the Furies completely destroy the Zeds unit, and Highway 1 is safe. The attack in Highway 1 will raise the infection level from 7 to 8. The trailing zombies on the interstate will now continue their advance towards town center, with a 10 strength zombie mob moving into Interstate 4 and a lowly 2-point strength Zed unit moving into Interstate 6. And finally, in the mountain track, a 6-point strength Zed unit moves into Trail 6. And once again threatening Lefty's Pass. That concludes the zombie phase. We'll move on to our action phase. We have 1 action point available. We'll begin on the forest track with Sheriff Hunt using his leadership ability to encourage the civilians to forage in St. Thomas. Rolls a 5, and the civilians are successful, raising our supply level from 2 to 3. We'll spend an action and activate the 3 strength point security guard unit at the security guard post. We'll also spend 1 ammo, and they're going to make a gunfire attack on the Zeds at the catacombs. Rolls a 5, and the security guards inflict 1 hit on the zombies in Red Labs 3. Finally, we're going to use our player action token, and we're going to activate Mr. Johnson at the Lucky Strike mine. He's going to employ his scavenger ability and see if he can find some ammo. Unfortunately, the roll is a 3 and a 1, and Mr. Johnson is unsuccessful. That'll complete our actions phase. We'll move on to our housekeeping phase and the start of a new round. The zombies have made great strides on all sectors of the map, in particular in the tunnels. We begin our new round by drawing an event card, and that reads, "The doctor is in." We begin with the 4-hour phase that has 0 activations. Move on to the infection phase. We won't need to roll for that, but there is an event, and it says at the end of this phase, immediately place infection to 13 and conduct an unchecked outbreak. Oh boy. All right. So the infection track is automatically moved to 13, and we will have an uncontrolled outbreak. Make a 2d6 roll and move the infection level down accordingly. The result is a 7, and that's going to reduce the infection level to 6. So we're going to draw a fate card, and the fated track is the highway track, and we're going to draw a super Zed, which is going to appear because of that uncontrolled outbreak, and that'll be placed on the chaos spot closest to the town's center. On the highway track, that is going to be the nuclear plant. And at the nuclear plant, a Ravager's Super Zed appears. The description reads, "Don't let their weak, full-strength side fool you. They are innocent and almost human in their near-dormant form. But once they become bloodied in combat, Ravagers transition to maniacal killing machines, going from a strength of 1 on their full-strength side to a strength of 8 on their reduced strength side." And the fate card event reads, "Infected Vermin." Play this card. Place the infected vermin standee on the start space of the track where there are the most Zed units. Until this unit is removed, +1 infection at the beginning of every infection phase while the infected vermin is in play, but not on a start space. The track with the most Zeds is the highway track, so the vermin will appear in the starting space of the highway track. We move on to the eat phase, and we're not required to use any supplies. Now the Zeds phase will begin, and it will be a triple activation, 1 on the highway track, 1 on the mountain track, and 1 in the tunnel track. We'll begin with the activation of the highway track, and the Ravagers in the nuclear plant will move to Interstate 2. But Colonel Kingman and his defensive perimeter ability is going to attempt to deny them to move into the space. But Colonel Kingman rolls a 3, and his efforts are in vain. Ravagers enter Interstate 2. Powerful 10 strength Zed mob unit will move from Interstate 4 into the nuclear plant. A tiny 2 strength Zed unit in Interstate 6 will move to Indeberg, while the infected vermin move from the start space to Interstate 6. Now that they're no longer on the start space, they're going to begin to spread their infection throughout Farmingdale. Next, the mountain track will activate, and a 6 strength Zed from Trail 6 is going to attack Lefty's Pass. Citizens of Lefty's Pass have prepared defenses. Those will move it down to a Zed's advantage. Roll is a 9, and the civilians of Lefty's Pass and their prepared defenses have managed to hold off the swarming Zeds. However, each group is going to take 2 hits. The battered defenders of Lefty's Pass have done their job, but they paid a great price for their defense. And now the tunnel track will activate. There is a damaged 6 strength Zed in the catacombs, and he is attempting to move to the security guard post. Rolls a 5, and he will remain in the catacombs. Now a 5 strength Zed in the other catacomb, Red Labs 5, is attempting to move into Dr. Martus's office. Rolls a 5, and the mindless zombies will remain in the catacombs, at least for this turn. And finally, a 5 strength zombie in the Chromotechnics lab will move to Red Lab 6. That will complete the Zeds phase, and we'll move on to our actions phase. We have 1 action available to us. We'll begin with Sheriff Hunt. He's going to utilize his leadership token, and he is going to encourage the civilians of St. Thomas to forage for supplies. Unfortunately, the roll is a 2, and they're unsuccessful in their efforts. We'll use one action and we're going to activate the 3-strength security force at the security guard post. We're going to spend 1 ammo and he's going to make a ranged attack against the damaged Zeds in the catacombs at Red Labs 3. Roll is an 8 and the security force inflicts a total of 2 damage to the Zeds unit in the catacombs. And that reduces their numbers to a strength of 1. Great job for the security forces. We're going to use our player action token, and Colonel Kingman is going to spend 2 supplies. He's going to prepare some defenses. Colonel Kingman has a prepared position at Interstate 1, anticipating the Ravengers arriving soon. And finally, Colonel Kingman is going to employ Dr. Martus's journal. It's going to allow him to gain the knowledge to destroy the Super Zeds unit in front of him in Interstate 2, and to gain a research from the cards that were set aside during setup and place it on top of the research discard pile. Dr. Martus's journal ended up allowing a science hero arrives. Place a new random available science hero unit in the town center. Remaining heroes are quite happy with the appearance of Special Agent Wright at the town center. Research card reads, as news of this, the most consequential emergency research project ever, leaked out to the scientific community, many sent messages of encouragement and advice, but one answered the call of duty with clarity. Arriving in a commandeered Bedvac helicopter at the Farmingdale General Hospital and then rushed downtown in a borrowed ambulance, it was an amazing moment when this medical miscreant emerged as Farmingdale's newest hero. And we'll move on to our housekeeping phase where all of our tokens will be reset. And I think we are going to end the video here. And this will bring the second video to a conclusion. We'll regroup for a third video in our continuing playthrough of Dawn of the Zeds. Thanks for joining me at the Solo Gamers Club, and I hope to see you for the next video. Have a good evening. Good night.